Today we are interviewing Sally H. Wise, who holds the position of Director of the Law Library and Professor of Law at the University of Miami. She's been there in that position since 2000. Sally, let's begin with a little personal history. Can you tell us about where you were raised and about your life both then and today?
Well, I was raised in Illinois, raised in the Midwest. I was born in Oak Park, which is the first western suburb of Chicago, and then we moved to Evanston, the first northern suburb of Chicago. So I grew up on the lake. I grew up on Lake Michigan, so I always was kind of loved water. And then also I went to Evanston High School, and then I went to college in Lake Forest, Illinois. So kind of stayed around the lake. And now I'm at the University of Miami, and I'm actually I would live in a high-rise condo, which is on Biscayne Bay, so back to water.
Water to water, in other words.
That's right.
Although I don't believe you're probably seeing too much snow down here.
No, the snow I'm missing, but I get to fly to it, so anytime I want.
That sounds to me like the best of all worlds. If you're in the mood for snow, you can go to it, but when you have to shovel and drive in it, you don't have to worry about that here in the Miami area.
That is right.
Yeah.
That is right.
Let's talk a little more perhaps about your education and training. You mentioned that you went to college in Lake Forest. Where did you specifically go? Or in other words, what are your degrees and where did you get them and that kind of thing?
Well, I went to Lake Forest College, which is a small liberal arts school in Lake Forest, Illinois, which is on the lake, and enjoyed that immensely. And actually, thinking about how I became a librarian, one of the things I remember is that, we spent time in the library at Lake Forest, but it was about a mile walk into town. And one time one of the librarians picked me up and drove me back to campus, and I thought, these librarians are certainly very nice to pick up students and bring them into campus, so I didn't have to walk anymore. So I got a degree in political science or politics, and at that point decided what I wanted to do when I grew up, and ended up going to law school at the University of Puget Sound in Tacoma, Washington, and this was pretty brand new law school, so it was really kind of fun being there at the beginning. And so graduated from law school, and then decided again, what am I going to do when I was growing up? And since at law school, I worked in the library, and the director of the library was Anita Steele, and she had just graduated from the University of Washington Law Librarianship Program. And then I also got to know really well Judy Schuler, who was a reference librarian. So the idea was in my mind to go to UW, to go to library school and get the Master of Law Librarianship. And I must have figured that out sometime in my second year, because you had to start in summer school, and I wanted to take the bar. I figured if I'm going to do 3 years, I want to be able to practice in Washington State. And so I started in summer school with another friend from law school, Mary Gleistein. And so we were both going to do this. And so we went to summer school together at UW, and she decided this wasn't for her, but I kept on going. So I finished up my third year of law school, and then in the summer took the bar at Washington State, and then joined up with my colleagues at UW. And those colleagues are friends today. Blair Kaufman, Marguerite Most, Kit Krylik. We adopted Stanley Strauss, who was our children's librarian, and then Tim Kearley. And so all of us are still friends today and still do things today. So went to library school, and then at UW, and then graduated, and then decided, again, where to go. And I ended up going back to University of Puget Sound, and where I'd gone to law school. So that was an interesting experience coming back as a librarian after just having the faculty being my professors. So I enjoyed And that was really, it was an interesting, that was really kind of fun. And at that point, since it was a new law school, UPS had started in a business park. And while I was a librarian, we moved to a renovated building downtown, and it was a renovated department store. So I think it was one of the first libraries with a escalator going through the library. So that was fun, and I orchestrated the move to move the building from Puget Sound, the business park, into the downtown renovated department store. So let's see. So now that was Puget Sound, and I stayed there as librarian about 4 years, and then decided I was looking for some different experiences and looked around and ended up going to SMU, Southern Methodist University, in Dallas, Texas. And that was actually my many relatives on my mother's side. And actually, I guess my father was born in Dallas, but thought that I had finally figured out and had come home. Even though I grew up in Chicago, my mother's relatives were from Texas. I finally come home to God's country. I finally finally moved back for them to Texas. And so I was at SMU and enjoyed that tremendously. Earl Borgeson was the director at the time, who had been director at Harvard and LA County and was a renowned person in our field, and got to know him really well, and his wife Barbara, and they just kind of took me in, and so a great time there. And when I was at SMU, I learned lots and lots about technical services, because Ora Jean Annis was the head of technical services at that time, and that's really a lot of my kind of technical services training was from Ora Jean, and she, made it very clear to me, because I was like head of public service or something like that, very clear to me that I should not do anything within that library, change a shelf of books without telling her. And I did something fairly immediately. And so Ora Jean said, So anyway, so it was a great learning experience. And SMU is it's a standalone library within a quadrangle for the rest of the law school buildings, and it was a large library, so it was really, and it was open to the public, and so we had public patrons and university patrons and then law students and law faculty, so it was a fascinating time. And actually one of the reference librarians there at the time was Kay Andrus, who I later met up with at Creighton when I was in Nebraska, and also one of the reference librarians at SMU is Virginia Templeton, who's now here at the University of Miami as a reference librarian. So people you see, throughout your profession, just in maybe different places, different responsibilities. But that's one of the great things about this profession is you really make friends for life, and you don't have to be in the same city. You move around and they move around. So then SMU for 4 years, and then I guess at that point I was looking to become a director, and I had a letter from the dean at University of Nebraska explaining his position. Harvey Perlman was he had a really idea what he wanted, where the law school to be, what he wanted the library to be, so I was intrigued, and then moved to Lincoln, Nebraska, and middle of the state, and having grown up in Illinois, another Midwestern state, this seemed great for me. Back to the snow, because SMU did not know how to Dallas did not know how to deal with snow whatsoever, nor ice. And every once in a while they might have ice. And I can remember one time where it was icy, it was not good, the driving was bad, but SMU was going to go on and school was going on. So everybody kind of got there somehow, by hook or by crook. And I'm sure there were a number of fender benders on the way because it was really slick and icy. And we all got there, and then at 9 o'clock SMU said, okay, we're closing, go home. And it was like, no, 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 no. You get up early in the morning and you decide one way or the other. So went to Nebraska where they did understand snow and ice and how to deal with it. And that was a fascinating situation there because the university the law library had been a branch of the university library. And there had been a split, and it had been just fairly recent. And so where the law school, the library now reported to the law school dean rather than to the university librarian. And so I was able, and that's why I had this interesting letter from the new dean of the school because, or relatively new dean of the school, because this was, this is going to be a change for everyone. So got in on the ground floor with that. There was a new university librarian, dean of libraries, and so we worked well together. And though the two libraries were autonomous, had a really interesting experience. And at one of the things in Nebraska we did, we joined together to do an RFP for a library system. Now, we were the small law library. We were not, the university library was much bigger, and we thought we were just going to, we could put our 2 cents in, but we at the time thought we might be going to notice because that was the dominant, really, for the university library solution. But there was a young group out there, Jerry Klein with Innovative Interfaces. And so we had Jerry Klein, we had interviews with a number of different places, and then decided we would go with Jerry Klein and negotiated the contract with him. So we were one of the first big university libraries on III, and we were so excited because it was going to be so useful for our serials check-in. But that was it was really interesting. So that was really kind of the beginning. And then we shared a system with them, which worked out really fairly well. But we had to do a lot of working between the two libraries.
So the university library also went with Innovative Interfaces.
We went together because we really thought we were going to have to go. The choice was really basically theirs.
Yeah, I was in the other sort of situation. We went with Innovative at American when I was there, but the university library was in a group with the other university libraries around the city, and they used Notice. So we had different systems. And I remember my colleague over, the head of the university library, was jealous of me.
That's right.
In the right sense of the term,
That's right.
because he had wanted the Innovative
That's
system, but he'd been outvoted by his colleagues.
We were so glad that Nebraska was willing to take the leap. Because Innovative was all new for these big ARL, Association of Research Libraries.
Well, I remember looking also like you did. We were just barely getting into automated systems, and there were others on the market that looked very attractive that didn't survive very long.
That's right.
So there was a certain element of risk inherent in selecting any system. Even Notice, which was so tremendously popular, made some real changes a few years later.
That's right.
But Innovative has made changes, but they're all enhancements and improvements, and it has survived.
Innovative has survived throughout, and now they've really changed up themselves. But that was a beginning, and that was that was exciting that we would all then just together start us on this ILS, and then to work out all the protocols between the two libraries, because that was really important. And so we became, in that sense, fairly close as libraries, especially in the technical services, to work out the protocols. And there, the University of Nebraska had 4 campuses, and so the librarians, we called ourselves UNCLE for the University of Nebraska Council of Libraries, and so we were the University, well, I guess it was University of Nebraska Omaha, then there was University of Nebraska Med Center, Lincoln, UNL, the University Library, then the Law Library, and then there was the University of Nebraska in Kearney in the middle of the state. So I guess there were 5 of us, and so we enjoyed talking to each other about, kind of what was going on in the different campuses of the University of Nebraska. So I got to know a little bit more about, medical librarianship, small college librarianship, urban college librarianship. So we had a really good collegial, working at that point. And also at the University of Nebraska, I got to know it's a relatively, it's a medium-sized law school. Maybe it was, I think, around 450 or something like that students. And my faculty colleagues were just great. And I have, kind of lifelong friends from, the faculty members there that I still travel with and visit. So it was really fun getting to know them and learning for them. And then my librarian colleagues, again, I've met up with Kay Andrus when he came to Creighton, which was in Omaha. Rebecca Trammell and I worked together, and now Rebecca is at Stetson. And so it was just interesting, all the different people working with and getting to know. And one of those things you hate to not mention people. I worked with Trish Cervenka, who's now at Marquette. I mean, so it's just amazing just to see. And we did lots of interesting things just at the library, just to be really very, very service oriented. And then also, just as I was leaving, they were beginning to do a renovation and an expansion of the library, which was much needed. I'm trying to think. Also in Nebraska, what was one of the things that, as librarian, I always wanted to figure out, what was going on, of course, with the school, the college. You always want to know what's up as you're trying to figure out, where to guide the library. But also it's useful to know what's going on within the university. And the law school was on the East Campus, which means we were 5 miles from City Campus in Lincoln. And we were actually on the farm campus. That's where the farmland had been. And then over the years, they needed space and they needed more buildings. And so the law school was actually moved to the East Campus, the farm campus. And we had the vet school next to us. But anyway, you were not really downtown. And so you were really on the downtown campus. And so you really didn't have kind of the sense of what really was going on kind of within the university. So I decided, I was, just in most universities, there is a faculty or academic senate, and so I became probably one, there may have been 2 of us, law school representatives on what for us was called an academic senate, who had administrators and faculty members. And so then over the years, I was probably on the Senate for about 10 years, and I was on the executive committee for 5, and then for about 15 months or so, I was president of the Senate. And so that was fascinating because, you worked with all the university administrators, chancellors, vice chancellors, and it was deans. So it was really fascinating to see the university from that standpoint. All the different things that went on within the university. And I think it was also great for the library because, I had a sense of what was going on when one of my colleagues, the dean at the time, the university librarian, the dean of libraries, Joan Giesecke, is still a good friend, and so I could work with her. She would we got to know all these different people, and and it was interesting just to see the university and then having to be called on to represent the university. And I must say in that being to be able to represent the university, one of the things we did, because Nebraska was a big football team, the president of the Senate was allowed to become part of the official party. And so we came down here when I was the Senate president. We played in the Orange Bowl in Miami, and we played FSU at the Orange Bowl. So I came to Miami in the early 90s, not knowing that I would end up here. And so that was kind of fun. And let's see, when I moved here in 2000, I went to an American Association of Law Schools meeting in someplace. I think it was maybe New Orleans. And for the championship football game, I think it was the championship football game. Anyway, big football game. It was Miami versus Nebraska. And so I had both colors. So I had my, I started out with both, and then Nebraska didn't do very well, and Miami won, is my recollection. And so it's been interesting to go from one, the University of Nebraska to the University of Miami, and both at that time were very prominent football teams, and both had some cyclical downtime.
Sounds like you were going to be on the winning side, no matter who.
No matter what.
Yeah.
So that was, and actually, thinking about football, when I went to SMU, I had not gone to a college that was football. I think maybe in high school. I mean, maybe went to a football game in high school. But when I went to SMU, Earl Borgeson made it quite clear to me that part of my duties was to go to football games with him and Barbara. And so, which I enjoyed tremendously, and that's how I learned football. So when I went to Nebraska, I could go to football games and understand what was going on. But that was when SMU was flying high, and SMU at that point played in Dallas Stadium, so in Cowboy Stadium. And so the SMU games were in the professional stadium. SMU after that, after I had left, had a major tumble and major issue, but so it's been interesting.
Well, I know that Earl was into sports because when I was in library school, we had to do field work. And in those days, I was in the same program you were in later. Marion Gallagher sent us to various places, and I went to Yale. My classmate went to Yale. I went to Harvard. And Earl was the librarian at that point at Harvard and been there for a number of years. And I remember the last couple of days when I had finished up the project that he had me working on and so on, he had this special assignment for me. And it turned out that opening day at Fenway Park. And his son and a friend were coming. And the three of us got on the subway and went to Fenway Park, and I'd never been to a major league baseball game because Seattle in those days had a West Coast team. They didn't have majors yet.
Right.
And it was quite a thing. And the previous year, the Boston team had gone to the World Series, so it was so much excitement in the game just because of that and the memories. It was really something. But that's Earl.
Absolutely.
And he made this sort of sound like it was a big assignment. I would be totally graded on the thing, and it was so much fun. But that was the way he was. So I'm sure you must have had a marvelous opportunity to work with somebody of that stature and such a great guy to start with.
He really was. It was just an enjoyable time to learn from him, what all the different places he'd been and seen, and he'd also been president of the association. So
he had been, yes.
So that was just a great learning experience, and then his wife was super, and so got to know her. But boy, football was, that's what you
I should probably offer to clip this out if you want, although you've noticed on at least one other interview I made an offer and forgot to do it. But when you were on the Senate and you got to be in sort of the official group, did that get you good tickets in the football stadium?
Not at Nebraska. No.
Oh, what a shame. I was
No.
thinking maybe the 50-yard line or somewhere real close.
No, that was when I went to Nebraska. That was one of the first things you did, and so I got tickets with some of my other colleagues, but we were just kind of the faculty tickets. No,
Oh, yeah.
we didn't.
You had to sit with the regular folks.
Yeah, we had to sit with the regular folks. And then when I left, actually, the dean of libraries there were three of us. There was John Lenich, who was a colleague in Nebraska, and then Joan Giesecke, dean of libraries. And the three of us had seats together at that time, and she managed to talk her way into being able to keep my seat so that the three seats stayed together. So now when I go back, and actually I go back every Thanksgiving to have Thanksgiving with colleagues from Nebraska, I get to go to my seat if it's a home game on the day after Thanksgiving. So it is very interesting how sports and that type of thing become kind of an integral part, because in Nebraska you would see so many people there game day, because it was not like SMU where it was the professional stadium. The stadium is on campus, and
Yeah.
so you just see lots of people there and can talk and schmooze and.
Yeah. But it's
see
still
what's
pretty
going on.
large.
Oh, it is.
You see a
It is.
lot of people there.
You see a lot, but
Yeah.
that was one of the things that was very beneficial to, be able to talk Nebraska, football.
You forgot to mention one other thing about the campus at Nebraska, because I have visited there a while back and did an interview for a lighter.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going through some of the buildings and seeing the signs telling where to go if the tornado alert had gone
Oh,
off.
that's right.
I don't
That's
remember
right.
seeing that in too many places.
Well, that was interesting, because in our building, I mean, you do have the tornadoes, and you're supposed to go, down to the deepest floor. And I remember there being one Saturday, and the tornado warnings went off. We have new faculty from California, and I think we just about went to their office and knocked on their door and said, because we knew they were in the building, this means get out. Because unless you've experienced a tornado, you suddenly don't know what those sirens are going off, and it's not a fire,
My
so it's not
understanding,
going
you
outside.
do take them
it's
very
going
seriously.
down. So yes, you do, and that's one thing. Moving around the country, you have a lot of different weather situations you need to worry about, and here it's
hurricanes, yes.
So we have our whole hurricane policies in case anything a hurricane comes down, and how we batten down.
A few minutes ago, you began to allude to some of the professional involvement. Of course, you talked about your work as head of the faculty, or the university, what was it, the Senate,
Right.
At Nebraska. And you've also done a lot of things for our profession more directly through, you were on the executive board of the American Association of Law Librarians a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
You've done other things. Could you talk a little bit about some of that service, and perhaps share some of the stories that you may have from that?
Okay, well, since I've been in different parts of the country, I've actually, I think, been in 6 chapters. So when I was in the Mid-America chapter, I was president of the Mid-America chapter, and that, again, it's interesting because that's a whole different kind of milieu than when you're working with the association and SISs. And so I've done a little bit of both. I've done the chapter president. I was chair of the academic SIS, a member of the executive board, and that was fascinating, seeing what issues grappling with at that point. I've been chair and members of different ALL committees, but another of the task force that I was on was we were working with research competencies, principles and standards, because one of the things that it seemed to us as an association, that as law librarians we are in the right type of position to be able to talk about what standards legal researchers need, and their competencies. And so to be able to, throughout law schools and all throughout the profession. And so actually right now I'm on a task force where we're working on implementing our principles, standards, and competencies for research competency. So that's kind of exciting because we see that that's something that the association can really make a mark on. Yeah. And to also be able to say, look at doing legal research right now is really probably harder than it was before in the past. It's not simply putting some terms in a box and the box will tell you where to go. You have to bring a lot to the table, and so that's one of the things I think really excited about working on. So so I've been in different parts of the association doing different things, and I also worked with the AALS chair of the section on libraries. So again, seeing it from kind of that perspective, a different group of people. But it's been interesting and fun and very worthwhile, just as you know, networking and meeting people. Yeah. All is just such a benefit.
Yeah. Well, you talked about the networking just on the campus community outside of the law school when you were on the Senate at Nebraska.
Oh yeah, that was fascinating.
You learn things, and most importantly is you meet the people and get to know them, and it can be, I think, most satisfying to have those contacts and other friends as well.
I know at ALS, it would always be so interesting because the librarians, we know each other because we see people at ALS and at AALL. So my colleagues at all the different institutions I've been at are just so amazed that I can stand in one place and just see so many people going by and saying hello because we just know each other, and you get to know so many people through other people. And thinking about, because when I said I went to the University of Washington, I didn't say I was there with Marian Gallagher, and she would do the same thing. I mean, we go to ALL, and you would just stand there with Marian Gallagher, and you would met everybody who walked by, because everybody, knew her. And so that was the most fascinating way to begin the profession, is just beginning to meet people. Yeah. So that was really special. And one of the things that I mentioned, our group at UW, where we got our Master of Law Librarianship, we, again, stayed together and are friends for life. And so we talked to Penny Hazelton, who now runs the University of Washington program. And so she agreed to take us on to teach in her summer school administrative program on kind of administrative management course. And so the five of us taught in different rotations and rented a house where we overlooked Lake Washington and had the best time, and hopefully the students had a fairly good time. Because again, we were all in different libraries, different types of libraries, and so it was, I think, an interesting learning experience for all of us. But again, the friendships that you've kept over the years.
Well, you named those folks too, and the three of us doing interviews currently, and so I don't know whether I'll have the opportunity to talk with some or all of them, but we have every one of them on our list. And hopefully they will say yes when I approach them, or whoever approaches them about doing these interviews.
That's right.
Not everybody does, but fortunately almost everybody has said yes. And that's been part of my pleasure in being part of this this project, or whatever one wants to call it. You've talked at various points about some of the changes we've seen in the profession. You talked earlier about deciding which system to go with, and you went with innovative interfaces. I'm getting tongue-tied here. For the automation and cataloging system. And those were scary decisions. I mean, I had to make them too in my day. And then we got into a new type of legal research. We now call it Westlaw and LexisNexis. which was an experience. There have been an awful lot of changes in our field as law librarians and in the ways people go about doing legal research. Tremendous new resources and things you can find, but new strategies and so on. Been a lot of change. Could I ask you to put your predicting hat on, or maybe your, I don't know what kind of hat to do this, and talk about where you think it might be headed in the next few years? Our profession and what our role might be. Would it be the same, or was it going to continue to change, or what? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, as you know, in this day right now, I mean, law schools, legal education, and the practice are all changing. So clearly, we will all be changing also. And one of the things is to really work with your law school to see what change and how they're moving. One of the things that I think is going to be more and more important is online, type of information clearly, but also I'm planning this summer of trying and experimenting to do legal research techniques, the advanced legal research course, as a distance education, online education. And I think we're going to be seeing more and more of that for the education, and it's going to be a challenge, how we do that to make sure that we need to get done what we need to get done. But we've also seen, just in communicating with the students, it becomes a really kind of an interesting challenge, because we do chat with them now, and we may, at the reference desk, and they may be up on the 4th floor of the library, or they just may be in London. I mean, we've had both experiences. Or one time the librarian said, why don't you just come down here and, we can maybe talk a little bit easier on what your strategy might be. And the student said, I'm in London. I went, okay, well, don't come down to the reference desk. And so it's going to be really how we figure out what's the best way to work with the students and the faculty, because you've got faculty also who are going to be in different places, and not every place always is going to be right on site. But we have to make sure that we do have ways that people can communicate with each other, so we don't become, small, just little groups in different places. But I think how we handle online education and then all the different online resources and still say, really as a major part of the law school, it's going to be, it's going to be a challenge for all of us. And I think also one of the challenges when I talked about these research competencies is to work with the students so that they understand what they don't know. Because a lot of times now, they don't understand what they don't know. In my legal research techniques class, I bring up, one of the first things I have them read is an article by a Dallas attorney, and he talks about how when he was when he started out in practice, he went to the law library and he read the books, and he understood the digest and all of these different things. And now with this was written in the 80s, with this Westlaw and Lexis, it doesn't seem like the students really understand as much because they're just looking at a screen. And so we talk about that in class and talk about kind of why he says that. What do we miss if, when he was skimming through cases, I think he was actually more the information, the printed word was coming into his mind when he was skimming through cases in the library. When we skim through cases in the screen, I think we're just looking for a key term and we're not really reading much of the case. And so I think it's going to be a challenge, a lot of us, to help students know what they don't know so that they can.
Sounds very much like there are some very interesting times ahead, and as much fun as we've had getting it to where it is now, it sounds like the future may be just as exciting, if not more so, for those who are still active, unlike my retired self.
No, it's going to be quite a challenge, and an interesting challenge, but it's going to be something that we all need to network as much as possible, because schools will be trying different things and will want to try different things. So,
yeah. Well, I think part of the challenge also is the huge amount of all new types of information and additions to the older types that we now have. And I remember reading recently, again, this is an advantage of being retired and having a little more time, there was a very interesting piece in the Law Library Journal recently talking about some of the things that were going on in the late 1930s with people, law librarians and practicing lawyers getting together to try and figure out if there was some way to limit the proliferation of materials that were coming along that people were struggling to go forward then and deal with. And as it turned out, economic reality prevailed, and this all died out about the late 30s. But they were thinking of, could they limit the number of cases that West Publishing was publishing.
That's right. That's right.
So that it'd be cheaper and easier to deal with, but it didn't happen. I think quite the opposite. We have become capable of more and more information, and we seem to make good use of it.
Well, and we also have Lexis and Westlaw, I think, because they wanted. At one point, they were saying, "Okay, we have more cases in our database." All of these non-published opinions started showing up.
Yes, well, that was part of what the folks in the 30s were working on, was to seeing, well, if they could eliminate publication, and then they even had some courts that said if it wasn't published officially, you darn well better not cite it to us. Well, that all broke down.
It did. Well, and then Lexis and Westlaw wanted to put them on because then more cases in their database, and now there's the whole question, and I guess the federal rules on exactly when you can cite and how you can cite and all of that.
Well, it does sound like you're bullish on the future for us, and I think that's good, and I share that, always have myself. It's customary, Sally Weiss, as we get towards the end of the interview, I like to give the person being interviewed sort of the last word, so to speak, although sometimes I steal the floor back and say something, but is there anything that you'd like to add before we conclude the interview?
Let's see, I had a few notes.
You're allowed to look at those.
Well, actually, a couple other things that I thought have been really fascinating here was throughout is with the American Bar Association, law schools have their 7-year sabbatical visits. And so it's been interesting to prepare for those as the school that is visited. But I have also gone as the librarian on many site visits, and that has been really interesting to go with your colleagues to go to a law school and just to see the entirety of a law school. I think that's something that, if people have an opportunity to do, it's really worth their while, and especially now with everyone talking about standards, ABA standards, it's interesting to see the different law schools and how we're the same or we're different. And another thing that I had the opportunity to do and encourage people to do is be on search advisory committees, because I'm right now on the search advisory committee for the University Librarian here at Miami. And so, because it's to our, the law library wants to have the best person in the university library, because there's so much collaboration and sharing the two libraries can do now than, sometimes been done in the past. So to take those opportunities, as I say, that being on the search committee is certainly going to be, it's a challenge, but it's going to be nice to have a new colleague. So I think that is really useful.
Hopefully somebody with whom you'll interact over the years in a very positive way.
That's right. I think that's where I think there's probably talking about kind of in the future, that's going to be much more of our futures, that we're going to be acting, collaborating together.
Yeah. I mentioned earlier that unlike yourselves, we used a different system from the university library when we started to automate. I would guess that kind of thing is more of a relic of the past from now on because of the need to make maximum use of resources.
Well, that's one of the things, because we really need to look at more of this discovery tool. But I'm kind of waiting for the university librarian to... So that'll be something that we want to see what his or her viewpoint is. And actually right now, the university library is having, none of us are searching for a new ILS, but we want to kind of keep abreast of what's going on. And so some of my colleagues they brought in Ex Libris to get an idea what Ex Libris looks like. 'Cause
Okay.
at some point, we, maybe.
I see that on a lot of websites of libraries, law libraries, a lot of resources that they obviously are getting by working with the other libraries on campus. And I think those collaborations are going to become much more the norm than they once were.
Yeah, I think so. I think they're going to
I
be.
mean, we as law librarians were perceived by our colleagues in other libraries as sort of deliberately separating ourselves. In those days, I think it's time, likely we're going to work together a lot more than we used to.
I think that's true, and I know we've done so here. I mean, I think we still treat and work with our faculty and students to a much higher level than the university librarian can possibly work with their faculty and students.
Well,
So
you have
we're
a
still
bit more manageable group, perhaps,
and
with whom you can work, but
there's
also
an
that has
expectation.
always been the expectation of law libraries and why law schools have been so adamant in having
Exactly.
its own library, and often standalone from the administrative structure
That's
of
right.
the other libraries.
That's
So that
right.
there could be this kind of hands-on special service when
That's
needed.
right.
Yeah.
That's right. I mean, that's what we're known for, and will, I'm sure, be known for in the future.
Yeah. Is there anything that comes to mind before we conclude?
Not that I can
I
think of.
butted in on your last word as
No.
usual.
No.
You watch a few of these interviews and you'll see I'm notorious for this sort of misbehavior. Well, it certainly has been wonderful talking with you today.
Well, I thank you. This has really been thank you for the
Yeah,
opportunity.
and visiting and seeing the library. I mean, here I am in Coral Gables, which
That's
is
right.
right next to Miami, and seeing your place and enjoying the weather. I did a couple of interviews yesterday on the way down. I stopped in Denver and didn't quite make it out of town before another snowstorm
That's
started
right.
up, but I did make it out of town.
Well, I don't know. It may be in the 50s tonight, so maybe it's pretty
Oh, you folks will be freezing, but I won't be. I'll think
That's right.
time to
We'll have
throw
our
off the blankets.
wool hats on tonight to keep our ears warm.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Sally.
Well, you're welcome. Thank
All right.
you.